Yeah, uh, yeah, uh.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to IDP Cover Zero, presented by Going for Two. We're back after a nice week one, going into week two now. I am Jerry, here with my co-host Jordan. What's going on, Jordan?
Not too much. I'm ready to rock and roll, sir.
One of our favorite teams is 1-0 on the year, and it's not the favorite between the two. How's that going for you?
I know the Rams played really well, which was surprising, but I mean, here's the thing. In my opinion, if you're going to be good, you have to be good enough to win the Super Bowl or bad enough to get a high pick. And I think the Rams are going to be in just that weird middle territory, borderline playoff, but they make it, they're not winning. So I don't know if I should be excited.
Giving you some Jeff Fisher vibes over there.
Oh gosh, I mean, don't go that far. That's just harsh.
All right, so we had a pretty good week one, I'd say. Some upsets. Obviously, Monday night was one of them, and not a huge upset. I think the spread was only like 2.5, so it's not like a crazy upset there. But the Rams was an upset too. A lot of IDP stuff going on. Had Bobby Wagner had like close to 20 tackles. I think 19 tackles overall, and so he's showing out in front of all the young cats that he still has it. We're gonna mention him in a little bit. Get into the top performers of week one, and what I'll do is I'll mention the top 10 overall. It's going to include all the positions, and then I'll give you the top five of each position group. So for the most part, linebackers are going to be covered in this top 10, and then I'll mention the other defensive linemen and defensive backs. Jordan will give his input on them, and if anything's surprising, I don't think anything's really surprising in the top 10 overall. But so the top 10 performers, this is going off of our IDP only league that we have going on that we're both in. The top performers, 17 tackles, 1 pass deflected, and 1 forced fumble. Josh Allen, guy that I brought up last week as one of my weekly twos, he had 10 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. He is tied for the league lead in sacks with TJ Watt and one other guy. I forgot who it was. So 3 sacks is the lead right now.
Drake Jackson.
Say that again?
Drake Jackson.
Yeah. Drake Jackson, that's who it was. I know it slipped my mind. Roquan Smith, another linebacker, 16 tackles, 2 of them tackles for loss, and 1 sack. Jesse Bates making his Atlanta Falcons debut. He looks like he's going to be a pretty good pickup for them. 10 tackles, 2 passes deflected, 2 interceptions, and a forced fumble. Bobby Wagner looking like he's 27 out there, 18 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. TJ Watt, it's nice to see a healthy TJ Watt. Love when he's on the field. 5 tackles, 1 of them for loss, 3 sacks, recovery, and a partridge in a pear tree for him. Jermaine Pratt, 11 tackles, 2 TFLs, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. Javon Holland, I remember bringing him up last week. He had 14 tackles, 1 of them for loss. Nate Hobbs, 12 tackles, 2 for loss. And Quincy Williams, Jets offense, 10 tackles, 1 for loss, and 1 pass deflected. Anything surprise you about those top 10?
No, not really. And it was kind of interesting. If you just dive into of the top 10 of each position, I mean, it was a lot of the same. I don't know, guys that you would expect, even Zaire Franklin taking on a bigger role with Bobby Okereke going over to the Giant. I can never say his name right. Roquan Smith and Bobby Wagner, TJ Watt. I don't know. Alua Khan with the Jaguars. When you go further down the linebackers list, Devin White rounding out the top 10 for linebackers. Just a lot of the guys that you would expect. And we'll talk about a few that are surprising to me. And I think one of the bigger things that you start to monitor early in the season, and this sounds kind of crazy, but it's not necessarily performance, but if they're being given opportunities. If there's a guy that's on the field for 100% of the snaps, but he only had 4 tackles, the results weren't there, but the fact of the matter is the coaching staff has enough faith in them to put them on the field for 100% of the plays on the defensive side of the ball. So opportunities will come. So there's interesting trends like that. But yeah, it was surprising to me. There wasn't too many guys. I'm like, who is that guy? Where did he come from? So I thought it was a pretty clean week one overall on the IDP side.
Yeah, and I think after maybe week 3, week 4, we'll start with the. I mean, we could even mention it as early as next week, but gotta. I want to get an idea, get a nice chunk of games, but we'll start spitting out what the total percentages for these guys, what they're seeing on the field. So that percentage for them, and all that information's online, so we can definitely uh, find that for you. Know what linebackers are out there for 95% of the snaps, and defensive backs are is Darius Slay covering Justin Jefferson 100% of the time, or is does he only stay on one side? Because I noticed that actually with Sauce Gardner, he only stays on the left side. So Diggs
Hmm.
did get him for a little bit, but he also when Diggs was lined up on the left side and Gardner's on the right side to the offense, it wasn't it wasn't Sauce on Diggs. So that was definitely interesting. The offenses will and I'm sure they noticed it last year too. But if offenses will put their better guy on the opposite side and try to get him open a little bit more, because we all know how good of a corner Sauce is.
Yeah,
Um,
and you'll see a lot of times. So, I mean, DJ Reed for the Jets, he had double-digit tackles this week across from Sauce, and it's for that reason. You'll see that second cornerbacks next to top end, top tier cornerbacks. Sometimes they're some of the best plays at DB. I mean, especially if you have to play a corner specifically, but teams are avoiding throwing towards Sauce. They're going to throw to the other side of the field, which means more tackle opportunities. So it's interesting because those guys aren't usually big names, but you can find a lot of opportunity there.
yeah, it's that's definitely a good point there, especially if you have to play a cornerback, like you said. Um, Always target the second guy or even the rookie cornerbacks. And I know you really didn't want to target Sauce specifically last year, or Tariq Woolen specifically last year because they were rookie or because they were good, even though they were rookies. But on the other side, like a Devin Witherspoon of Tariq Woolen, he should be making his debut this week. Might be a good target there. I'm not mentioning him at all. I don't know if you have him on yours, but let's round out the top five of the other two positions. You covered the linebackers already. So we mentioned Josh Allen, mentioned TJ Watt, Brian Burns decided to show up to camp and have himself a game. Derek Brown, also of the Panthers, and then DeForest Buckner round out the top five for the defensive linemen, and then the defensive backs. Blankenship and DJ Reed, you mentioned him already, and it looks like Blankenship is they played tonight. He was out, so he had a good week one, missed week two. Any anybody surprise you or anything? I mean, the Jets corner they had those three picks on on Josh Allen wasn't he's not listed. Must have only had just those three picks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point to make overall is people whenever I've played in IDP leagues with them, they're trying to chase interception. Sometimes oh, it's a bad quarterback, he's going to throw an interception, but I just think that's a dangerous game to play. I'd rather have the consistency and I don't know, a level of predictability with tackles and opportunities there. So, yeah, it is interesting when you look at things like sacks are a little different. Sacks, not that they're predictable, but more so, I would say, than interceptions.
I heard a stat also that this was the lowest scoring as far as touchdowns go. Week one in a couple years, only had about 57 touchdowns or something in week one,
Yeah.
and last couple years had like 70 and close to 80. So definitely some low scoring, some sloppy play. We saw it in our fantasy scores. Burrow wasn't that good. Um, I mean, it was just all over. Off the top of my head, I could name about 50 people that had zeros. Drake London, Dallas Goddard. So it's just a sloppy week one, but we did get some nice IDP play. Let's get into our waivers. Anybody that you're looking at picking up this week, and I know the waiver period passed already, but anybody that might be floating around out there that you could get for free or get it before Sunday.
Yeah, I'll throw out a few names at each position, and it's a mix of guys depending on if you're in a deeper league or you're only playing a few IDP. So I won't go through each one too in depth. I'm just going to throw some names out there. But Josh Allen, who you mentioned in your weekly twos last week, being the highest scoring defensive lineman, he's not overly owned in a lot of, especially shallow IDP leagues. His biggest problem last year was consistency. So it's TBD. He had a good matchup last week. So I'd monitor to see if he's consistent throughout the year. And if he is, I mean, he has the talent to be a top 10 a defensive lineman. Another one, Jalen Phillips of the Dolphins, defensive lineman, had 11 tackles last week, which for defensive linemen is crazy high. So he has a lot of talent. He had some injury concerns coming into the NFL, and so far he's had a pretty clean bill of health. And if he can continue to do that, he could be one of the most elite pass rushers in the league. So I like him a lot. A few linebackers that I mentioned last week that Ernest Jones going to have a lot of opportunity. Matt Milano, who we didn't mention, you and I talked about him after we were recording, but he's going to have a lot of opportunities in Buffalo. He's still being ranked like outside the top 20 in a lot of weekly rankings. So there's the chance that he is available in a league. You can also look at some other Bills linebackers that I'll mention later on. But Divine Diablo of the Raiders linebacker taking on a lot of responsibility, had 9 tackles this week. And then another one who I think is a big keep your eye on, Troy Anderson, who I mentioned briefly last week, taking on the linebacker one duties for the Falcons. Had 10 tackles in week 1 and really his first opportunity to show what he has. He has a concussion right now, so he might not end up playing this week, but I'm not sure if I'm picking him up, but I'm just putting him on the old watch list. And then 3 quick DBs. Jesse Bates, who you mentioned, who was the top scoring DB. Even looking at the week 2 rankings from Fantasy Pros, which I know a lot of people use that, he's still the 16th ranked DB this week after having a huge performance last week with double-digit tackles. And he's been a solid contributor over the last 5 years for the Bengals. So I think he's flying under the radar, and he's in a good system now. And Dax Hill, who replaced Jesse Bates for the Bengals, had 6 tackles, and he was second in the team in snaps, which is kind of interesting, taking over a starting safety role for the Bengals. And then I have Alohi Gilman of the Chargers, who had 11 tackles, and he played every single snap on the Chargers defense last week. So when you combine opportunity with production, that's going to pique my interest. So we'll track to see if he continues to have a strong start to the season.
All right, yeah, a lot of good names there. A couple names that we even brought up last year. So if you're in a dynasty league, keep an eye on some of these guys too. That I mean, we mentioned Diablo last year. I think we mentioned a little bit of Troy Anderson, maybe
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of the year. I know Diablo was a mid to end of year guy too. He got a little consistent there. Zaire Franklin we didn't mention him. I mean, we mentioned him at the beginning when he was a top scorer. He's pretty much owned in a lot of leagues now, but he was a guy that we were monitoring. Shaq Leonard, Zaire was the guy that just kind of took over because Shaq missed a lot of time, and now all of a sudden he's putting up 45, 50-point IDP games. So definitely keep an eye on some of these guys. If you got a deeper bench, pick up some of these guys, and if not, then put them on your watch list. Star that little star on Sleeper. All right, let's talk about our weekly twos now. This is a segment that we do every week. Give you 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 2 defensive backs. Not bona fide number 1 studs. We're not going to be out here telling you to go play TJ Watt and Roquan Smith. That's obvious. So these are going to be other guys that maybe you're kind of in the middle between 2 guys, or you want to get some opportunity because you got player A going up against the number 1 offensive line in the league. They don't allow any sacks, or player B, but you're kind of scared of him. So I'll kick us off first. I'm going with a rookie going up against a rookie. Will Anderson of the Texans going up against going up against Anthony Richardson. Reason I say Josh Anderson is because this is who I attacked last week with Josh Anderson, and he ended up having 3 sacks. Obviously, the Houston defense isn't as good as Jacksonville's, but it's coming together. Will Anderson had a pretty decent debut in week 1, and he's going to be out there a lot. They moved up for him. They obviously they picked C.J. Stroud number 2, and then they moved right back up to number 3 to pick Will Anderson. Got the top defensive player in this draft on paper, at least, and I think he's going to nice little rookie on rookie battle going in there, going to face the Colts, nice division rival, Houston home game there. I don't really see it going to be too high score. Get in the backfield, get a couple tackles for loss, maybe get the Anthony Richardson once or twice, and put a nice little game together. Being a rookie, he's not really a guy that is started in a lot of leagues. I know I'm not really starting a lot of rookies in a lot of my leagues. I do have him in a best ball IDP though, so that's nice. If he does happen to go off, it's nice for me. But yeah, he's somebody that I'm keeping my eye on. I'm fine playing him this week. Like I said, I want to attack those younger quarterbacks that are prone to make mistakes, or in Anthony Richardson's case, he does like to run a little bit, so maybe they could trip him up behind the line and get credited with a sack if even if Anthony Richardson's trying to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one, especially early on in the season. Those are pretty easy targets to stream, so I like that. The one that I have, my first one, is Drake Jackson, who had a big week last week. I mean, maybe you could include him in the waiver wire segment. I don't know if I'm ready for that level of commitment for him. I'll stream him for this week. I'm not ready to keep him on my roster permanently, which is more what I when I view a waiver segment. It's more permanent ads, not guys that you're streaming. So, but Drake Jackson has a lot of talent, and that 49ers defense tends to pump out just crazy numbers on the defensive side of the ball. They have a great system when it comes to IDP scoring. So he's not playing consistently across from Nick Bosa yet, but I think whoever ends up starting across from Nick Bosa is very enticing. There's just going to be less eyes on them and more opportunities for one-on-ones to get to the quarterback. So I think he has a great opportunity to follow up his week one 3-sack performance against the Rams. Rams offensive line is still going to be ranked towards the bottom of the league. Couple that with they're going. I mean, you saw it last week with Cam Akers with 22 carries. They're going to run the ball a lot, and that offense is going to revolve around the run game, especially without Cooper Kupp. So poor offensive line, high opportunity for tackles behind the line of scrimmage with a team that runs the ball a lot. So I think Drake Jackson actually has the ability to follow up his week one performance with another strong one.
All right, I'm going with my second defensive lineman, Dorrance Armstrong of the Cowboys, going up against the Jets. This is going to be a defensive battle. Unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers is out for the year with a torn Achilles, and now Zach Wilson's in there. I mean, I don't think the Bills got to Zach Wilson really too often. They got him, they knocked him down a couple times, once or twice. They got a couple sacks on him, but I remember why number one being a Bills fan, number two just being able to sit back and watch it and not have anything to worry about. But Greg Rousseau, I don't think he was credited for any sacks, but he was all over the place. And this Jets offensive line is not good at all. Not that Aaron Rodgers was really mobile. He could run if he needed to, and Zach Wilson might even be in 45 years younger. He might be able to run a little bit better. But the offensive line is still the offensive line, not good. Dorrance Armstrong had 2 sacks last week going up against the Giants. Daniel Jones, they got him 7 times. Just that whole defense overall for the Cowboys was just all over the place. But Armstrong is I just like the matchup. I think you're gonna on both sides of the ball. You get an edge rusher, Jermaine Johnson from the Jets going up against the Cowboys, who that offensive line isn't as good as what it once was before. Maybe they get to Dak Prescott a couple times, but I could see a sack or two in this game, getting Zach Wilson down, maybe getting a pass deflected, with Zach trying to get the ball out quick to one of his running backs, and I remember mentioning him last year too, a couple times on my weekly twos, and I'm just gonna keep on attacking these young quarterbacks and quarterbacks with bad offensive lines.
Yeah, I mean, Dorrance Armstrong was definitely a regular for both of us on weekly twos, and he was in the IDP only league that you were talking about. He was on my roster pretty much all last year. He had a very quietly had a great year for them. And it's an interesting matchup overall. You could argue those were the two most impressive defenses of week one, so it'll be interesting to see how they match up in week two here. So going from one Cowboy to a former Cowboy, I have Randy Gregory going up against the Commanders this week. A guy that's dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the course of his career, but the Commanders, I mentioned it last week, were projected to be one of the bottom three offensive lines in the league, and they allowed the most points in week one to defensive linemen. So they proved that prediction may be true. So I think Randy Gregory is under the radar guy in a great matchup. The talent's there. He's healthy. I think it's a good combination for him to get a few tackles for loss and be a solid streamer this week.
All right, moving on to the first linebacker for me. I'm going with Devondre Campbell of the Packers. Going up against the Falcons, we saw even last year too, and ever since Arthur Smith came over, want to run the ball. They're using the two-headed monster of Tyler Algier and Bijan Rob. I think I just got a notification today or yesterday that Cordell Patterson is back to being a little bit more healthy, so they might work him in a little bit. So with the linebackers, I'm just trying to get tackles, And Quay Walker is I think Campbell complements him really well. This could be this is probably one of the trickiest games to predict just overall, because like Atlanta looked pretty good last week, but they went up against Carolina, who's not really looking too good. And then Green, so in a questionable game, just destroyed Chicago. So it's just I don't know really where to go with the game overall, but I think Campbell's going to be flying all over the field, maybe get you double-digit tackles, possibly get into the backfield. Because who I wanted to go with, Ritter was another guy that I wanted to attack as far as defense. So maybe he gets back there and gets his hands on Ritter a time or two and a couple tackles for loss and stuffs Algier at the goal line or something. But Devondre Campbell of the Packers, I think, is a good play this week.
Yeah, no, I like that one. The next guy I have led the Steelers in tackles in week 1, which went kind of under the radar, but that's Quan Alexander going up against the Cleveland Browns this week. 9 tackles in week 1, like I said, led the team, which was a little surprising to see him get that much volume and that much run. But those are trends that I'm paying attention to early in the season, and guys that are under the radar that probably aren't going to be rostered in strong matchups. So the Browns, I think, are going to rely on that run game while Deshaun Watson still tries to find his groove. That whole offense runs through Nick Chubb. So I think Quan Alexander is going to have a lot of opportunity to put up a solid 8+ tackle performance.
I'm staying in that game, and I'm staying on that side of the ball, and
Okay.
going with another linebacker for the Steelers, kind of all for the same reasons. Nick Chubb, just all over the place last week, and I got to tell you, after the show, how me and a couple guys at work missed out on a nice chunk of change because of Nick Chubb. But we'll talk after. Elandon Roberts of the Steelers, linebacker. Another guy that he's getting rotated in there with them, with Alex Highsmith and Quan Alexander. Steelers defenses, they're good. They let up, what was it, 37 to the 49ers last week, so it didn't look that good. But they're going to get it together. This team is going to go through the defense. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like the offense is really going to help them out too much. So they could be on the field a lot. You could get a lot of snaps from Elandon Roberts. You could get maybe he's chasing Nick Chubb down and get a couple tackles. I don't know if he'll reach double digits at all. I think he only had 6 last week up against the 49ers, and we know the 49ers like to run the ball a lot with Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell. But it's going to be I think it's going to be a better game for the Steelers. I got the Browns winning, but I think that the Browns are going to want to pound Nick Chubb. It's early in the year. They're just going to give him the ball. He's one of the best backs, trying to run him down, and I think Roberts is a solid back of the bench flex play. And they play Monday night too, so it's a guy to root for on Monday. A couple extra points to help you win your week.
Yeah, I like that one, obviously, because I picked one that was very close. My second linebacker is Micah McFadden of the Giants. He had 11 tackles in week 1, which was one of the bright spots for the Giants because not much was happening on either side of the ball for them. But he was a rookie whose talent I really liked coming into last year. He won a starting job this camp, so he was on the field almost 100% of the snaps, and he saw a great success with it. So going up against the Cardinals this week, I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find one of us not mentioning people going against the Cardinals on a weekly basis, because that's just low hanging fruit that you
Yeah.
have to take advantage of. And it's interesting when you're talking about streaming linebackers too, because not only is that a whole offense a mess, but I think it's an offense that's going to have to try to run the ball if they're going to have any success. They can't rely on Josh Dobbs or Clayton Tune or whoever ends up starting for them this season. If they want to move the ball at all, it's going to have to go through James Conner and any other backs that they rotate in and out. So I like Micah McFadden's matchup this week, and he's definitely available. So I would take advantage of it.
All right, my first defensive back kind of slapped me in the face a little bit with receptions, which I'm not necessarily chasing the interceptions, but I'm going up against
Right.
of the Raiders going up against the Bills. Josh Allen likes throwing interceptions as much as I hate to admit it. But it's a tough. I don't think it's a tough game. I'm not sure how the Bills offense is going to respond. I think they're going to come out strong and firing, but this is a team that can also be ran on. So I don't know if James Cook is going to get more work. Damian Harris is going to get more work, but we know that Buffalo likes to throw the ball. We know that Josh Allen is prone to turnovers, and we know that there's really only one outside target for Josh Allen. So Marcus Epps can kind of shade over there, maybe get some pass deflections or even sneak an interception in there. And then with the two tight ends that they got going over the middle, that's a lot of tackle opportunity, Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. So I kind of just like Marcus Epps, strong safety back there, just kind of being all over the field and maybe racking up double-digit tackles and possibly getting a turnover on this Bills offense.
Well, I have a guy on the same team. So I guess we'll just keep up with that trend. Nate Hobbs is mine, who you mentioned as one of the highest scoring DBs, and he's still available in like every league somehow. And I think that as we move through the season, that he'll be 100% owned in most IDP formats, and that's because of the way that the Raiders are using him. So they used him in that star role, which you'll hear a lot of people say on the defensive side of the ball, which basically means that he's just moving around everywhere. He's playing safety, he's playing on the outside, he's playing nickel. They're just using him as the ultimate chess piece on the defensive side of the ball. So whenever they do that, you're putting a lot of faith in that player to really, because a lot of times defensive effectiveness will run through that particular player. So the fact they're using him in that role, I think, is says a lot about him. He had 12 tackles in week one for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. I mean, going up against a high volume offense, the Bills, I think, are going to pass the ball quite a bit this season. So he's going to have a lot of opportunities for tackles across the middle, as you mentioned. And I think he's just going to be, especially for a DB, a solid source of tackles with the way that they're moving him around. You saw it in week one, and I think it's going to be a trend for the entire season. And we saw guys, so the popular one last year was the Rams put Jalen Ramsey in that star position on their defense. And we did last week mention the top 10 at every position. I think Jalen Ramsey was around 6 for all defensive backs last year. So that's just an example of how that position, that star role, can translate into somebody having big IDP numbers. So he's a guy that I would stream, and I was going to include him in the waiver wire segment as well, but I didn't want to double dip. So Nate Hobbs should be owned, I think, in almost all IDP formats.
All right, so we got a pair of Raiders, we got a pair of Steelers. My final player,
Great.
final player defensive back, Honey doing it at his old age. Tyrann Mathieu of the Saints. As long as he's been in the league, I still don't know exactly how to pronounce his name like the correct way. But the Saints going up against the Panthers, that's another Monday night game, which is kind of dumb, by the way. They're not that there's two Monday night games,
Wow.
but they kind of cross over each other. I think one starts at 7:30 Eastern, one starts at 8 Eastern. So I remember but years past, they would have an earlier game at 7, then a West Coast team, LA or San Francisco, start at 10, which I thought they were smart and they could do that, but they got two primetime games basically on at the same time. So I'm not really happy about that. But I guess that happens every Sunday with 5 games on at the same time. But the Honey Badger going up against the Panthers, rookie quarterback there, Bryce Young. He didn't look too hot. The Falcons were just all over him. Jesse Bates was one of the top defensive backs on the week. I think Honey Badger could kind of follow in his footsteps and do the same thing, rack up some tackles, maybe get an interception or two. And we've seen it throughout his whole career. Anywhere that he went, he does like to not necessarily cheat up a little bit, just because that's just how the defense is drawn up. But he can get to the backfield too, get in there on a safety blitz and get to the quarterback or get a couple tackles for loss on a team that does like to run the ball. They don't have a lot of any elite pass catching weapons in Carolina right now. So it's it's not hard to let him roam freely and just go after the ball carrier. So Honey Badger going up against the Carolina Panthers Monday night doubleheader while the Browns and the Steelers are on. A couple divisional games, and I'm not happy about it.
Tell me how you really feel. My second DB is Andre Cisco of the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Chiefs. One of the ways that I target defensive backs is just looking at high volume passing teams, which I think the Chiefs are going to be. And I mean, historically, they have been. So Andre Cisco had 10 tackles last week, was very involved for the Jaguars. I like his upside quite a bit. And for me, when I'm streaming DBs, I'm trying to target safer options who, you're looking at 6+ tackles, not guaranteed, but a higher likelihood of that. So I think going against the Chiefs, solid matchup for him across the middle. And he proved last week that he can be effective with volume. So Andre Cisco of the Jaguars is my second DB.
All right. I think we got a nice solid list this week. 12 guys there that you could go out and just make a whole new lineup with our guys that we said. And
That would be kind of fun, honest. You would have done really well last week. I was going through just everyone that we said last week, and we really didn't have a huge dud at all. So maybe, yeah, you should listen.
yeah, I was actually thinking about that too. I was looking at it Sunday night or Monday night. I was just going through. Obviously, I don't think the Monday night game had played yet. But I don't think we had anybody from the Jets or Bills either. But I was going through it, and Javon Holland with the 14 tackles and Josh Allen with the 3 sacks, and they both ended up in the top 10. I don't remember who else I had, and I don't remember who you had because I don't listen to you.
I see how it is. That's a good idea.
All right. So our final segment that we do every week, obviously we're an IDP show, but talking about defense, if you still play in leagues where you have a full defense, we actually have a couple where we play with a few IDPs and then we still have a full defense too. So we're going to give you our defense streamers of the week. Jordan probably has a low-hanging fruit of the Giants, but I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Bucks. They held the Vikings to 17 points. Not that the Vikings are a juggernaut offense, but they have one of the best receivers in the league. They got a quarterback that can sling the ball if they needed to, and they're going up against the Bears this week. And the Bears' offense did not look good. The Bears put up 20 points. Roshan Johnson had a late fourth quarter garbage time touchdown, so it really was like 13 points that they put up. And Justin Fields, he didn't look great at all, where everybody's expecting not second year, everybody's expecting another leap from him, because at the end of the year, towards the middle of the year, end of the year, he kind of turned around, and then DJ Moore in the offseason and upgraded, I guess you could say, their running backs with drafting Roshan and having Khalil Herbert being a guy now. And but the offense just it didn't really go anywhere. They gave up 4 sacks. I think that the Tampa Bay Bucks could get to Fields a couple times. I talked about them last week. They got a pair of corners in Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean that can, I mean, yeah, I like DJ Moore. He's one of my personal favorite players, but these guys could kind of lock him down. Antoine Winfield, safety. They got a pair of really good linebackers there, Devin White, and still doing it. Shaq Barrett, really good. I think that I think it's gonna be a low scoring game overall because the Bucks really don't impress me that much either. But it could be like another 20-17 game for them. Couple turnovers, get a couple sacks on Fields, and just I think it's a nice stream for them this week. And I think it's a home game for the Bucks too. I think it's their home opener. They were in Minnesota last week, I believe. Let me double check. Killing time, killing time, killing time. Yeah, it's a home opener for the Bucks, looking to go 2-0 with Baker Mayfield.
Your lack of faith in Justin Fields is very
Well,
disappointing
he
to me,
didn't
but
really
that's
show
okay.
much week one.
It's 1 week. I'm okay with it. One, you have to mention the Giants. I mean, you're doing everybody a disservice if you don't. And they're very lowly owned still, and I think a big part of that is because of how poorly they played last week against the Cowboys. So I get it, but this is a talented defense, and I believe in the culture that they've built too with Brian Daboll. So I don't think they're going to have a poor showing against the Cardinals in week 2. I think they come out huge. At the beginning of the week, they were only 7% owned in Yahoo leagues. They're up to 41% now because everybody's picking them up, and probably 30% of that is me. Because if the Giants have a poor game this week, then I'm going to lose a lot of leagues. And vice versa. If the Giants defense has a huge game, I'm winning every single league this week. And there's been a few leagues where after the waiver period, I've noticed people dropping the Giants. I'm like, oh my God, against the Cardinals, you're going to drop them? I mean, that's your opportunity to play them. So you have to say the Giants. They're still lowly owned, 34% on Sleeper, too. So highly available. But I had to come up with a backup one, too. My secondary one was the Browns, who are right around 30% owned and even lower on Yahoo. So they go up against the Steelers this week, which same thing. I wasn't overly impressed with the way that the Steelers offense played. There's a lot of questions around that offensive line. I'm not a Kenny Pickett believer. He's going to turn the ball over a little bit. So you couple questionable quarterback play with sketchy offensive line and a defense that looked amazing. And I know the Bengals came out flat, but you have to give some credit to the way that the Browns defense played. So I think it's a nice matchup for them to continue the momentum. And then I mentioned last week that I was always going to mention a defense for the next week, not week 2. So week 3 defenses that I'm looking to pick up now. Still the Jaguars. And a lot of people dropped the Jaguars after their week 1 matchup against the Colts. They have a tough one against the Chiefs, so I get it. But they play the Texans next week. So there's another good opportunity for the Jaguars, only being 16% owned in sleeper leagues right now. So if you have the opportunity to start looking ahead and stashing a defense on your bench, or Jerry and I mentioned last week that if you have a guy that's out, goes on IR, whatever your league's rules are for your IR spot. I think a lot of leagues are trending towards if somebody's out, you can move them on the IR spot. So if that's the case, slide a guy into the IR and then pick up your defense for next week. So you're not competing with everybody on the waiver wire. So the Jaguars, I think, are a good one. And then my secondary one is the Seahawks up against the Panthers. They're only 18% owned right now.
All right, yeah, you're definitely not going to want to play the our streamer defenses this week. Now the Bucks go up against Philly, and the Giants go up against. I just had it. Who was it? You got it in front of you?
49ers.
Yeah, that's who it was. Okay. Yeah, so gonna want to drop them after this week. And
Yeah.
I like how you brought up, after I brought up, that you could put out players on IR in most leagues, or obviously it has to do with the settings. But one thing that I've noticed on Sleeper, very important, is and most of my leagues are on Sleeper, so like these things could happen on other platforms too. I'm not 100% sure. Those are kind of like my secondary leagues. All my most important leagues are on Sleeper. That's what I pay attention to the most. But one thing I noticed on Sleeper is player X is ruled out in the game on Sunday, or even before the game. I guess it works too. But he's ruled out in the game on Sunday, and then Monday it's still technically that week, so he's still out. He's out still on Tuesday during the day. So when you go to do your waiver pickups and you got Deontay Johnson, who was ruled doubtful now. I don't know if it changed yet, but so on Tuesday he was ruled out. And then like once everything processed and they're getting camp reports, or not camp reports, but like Wednesday practice reports and stuff like that, then it changes to what the new status is, doubtful or questionable, whatever. But if they're out on Tuesday, throw them into the IR right away, and then that way you have that open spot, and then all your waivers will process Tuesday night, and then Wednesday you'll have to maneuver your lineup around if you want to make more pickups or anything like that. because it'll say that you don't have a legal roster. It'll say that you have players in your IR that need to come out. But take advantage of the period that they're out up until like mid-afternoon on Tuesday, and then you're able to pick up a couple extra guys, and without having to drop anybody at all.
Yeah, it's a great strategy. And screw Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I got him everywhere.
I keep getting yelled at because he was out and he's in my IR, and Sleeper keeps yelling at me to move him.
Moved him to my IR in about 10 leagues yesterday, or Tuesday. So, yeah, I'm not. I mean, I was able to take care of it, but he was one of my highest owned players. I was all over him. Figured that he can. He's not going to go 2 years in a row without a touchdown, so he's got to get something. It's not going to happen.
Is that a dare?
But that's going to be it for today's show. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the games this weekend. Got a nice slate of games, couple division games Monday with the doubleheader, and how many times can I say doubleheader? But Jordan, this has been Cover Zero IDP, and we will see you guys next week.